All right, guys, when it comes to politics today, we're going to take time out to talk about the original infrastructure bill, the Build Back Better plan that President Biden had set forth in January. What's the difference between what the infrastructure bill is now and the one that they had back then? We're going to hear details about it from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, in other words, AOC, with her interview with Rachel Maddow this past week, giving a breakdown on why it is so important to have both sides of these bills. Also, we're going to talk about when it comes to the cost of living increase or the cost of living adjustment for 2022, we're going to give you the official date that they're going to make the announcement so you'll know what increase you'll be getting. We're going to talk about all that in details here on Mostly. Let's get started. When it comes to the Build Back Better plan, in other words, the reconciliation bill, that $3.5 trillion infrastructure stimulus bill that President Biden and the Democratic Party has been trying to get across the finish line, well, AOC has a lot to say about it, and she's going to give her details during an interview, and she's going to give her details right now, in which and she's going to give the details of and she's going to give the details of how important this bill is. And she's going to give the details on why this bill is a once-in-a-lifetime bill.
Why is there an effort to link them both and make sure that the big bill doesn't get delayed indefinitely after the small bill passes?
Yeah, so I completely agree with you that a lot of this discussion about process and tit for tat just is very difficult to follow and doesn't really cover the heart of this conversation, which is that we have two bills at present, one which underfunds most priorities across the board. So there are very few priorities that even get the full funding that they even need. And then there is the larger, what is known as the budget bill, reconciliation bill. That has the stuff that you're going to feel in your everyday life. Universal pre-K. We're talking about college, community colleges. We're talking about expansion of Medicare. And we're debating including vision and dental in Medicare, conversations about lowering the age of it, robust climate action, renewable energy. All of that stuff that you're going to feel in your everyday life is in what is known as the Build Back Better Act, aka the Reconciliation Bill. Now, when we were discussing the scope of this bill way earlier in the year, this was the original infrastructure bill. And we have a vast majority of Democrats, about 96%, that are in agreement of the entire agenda. Now, a very small handful of Democrats, about 4% of the party, are trying to essentially split these two priorities up. And I personally don't think it's an accident that the ones that a lot of lobbyists love are in the much smaller, underfunded bill that don't make prescription drugs easier to buy and more affordable, etc. And what they want to do is split them apart, force a vote on the first one. And because we have such narrow margins in the Senate and the House, the read that we have is that they'll just dump the second one, leave the other one out to dry, and just never actually vote on it. And so the way that we bring our two parts of the caucus together is by saying, you know what? My bill is bound up in your bill, and your bill is bound up in my bill. So do I love this very, what I would argue a conservative underfunded bill? No. But I will vote for it if we pursue them both together. But what we should not take is this approach, which is what people are trying to do by forcing a vote tomorrow on an under-considered, under-amended bill by itself, by saying, we want to force this vote right now, and it's either my way or the highway. You don't work together. I want your vote, but I will give you nothing for it. Your community will not benefit from this as much as mine will. We don't have to pursue that route. We can, instead of saying it's either mine or yours, we can say both of us can succeed together. And that is the case that the Progressive Caucus is making.
She stated that it is the Build Back Better plan. A lot of us forget that prior to the pandemic, life wasn't all peaches and cream for most of us. Most Americans haven't had a decent raise in years. The cost of living increase or adjustment was basically next to nothing. The housing bubble was about to burst again at the same time the college tuition bubble still ready to burst. And on top of that, corporations and the rich had gotten major tax cuts between 2016 and 2017 under President Donald Trump. So once again, it was not all peaches and cream for most of us. That's why President Biden said that we need a Build Back Better plan, better than what the last administration had put in order, and something that's better for us everyday citizens. For example, if a person is working, why is it that their child care cannot be covered? Also, when it comes to universal child care, you should also have more weeks for fathers and mothers when they first have a child that are paid for. Once again, the United States is only one of two countries, major countries in the world that does not have universal health care for families when you first have a child. The other one is the island of New Guinea. The other thing that she mentioned was 2 years free college tuition. We deserve to have the first 2 years of college absolutely free. A lot of countries already have 4-year tuition, a 4-year program. And the next thing that she mentioned when it came to Build Back Better is this: Medicare expansion. There should be, just like Bernie Sanders said, for those that are seniors should automatically be able, by way of Medicaid or Medicare, receive free hearing, free dental, and free vision. Why individuals don't have that, I don't understand. I didn't even know that that didn't even exist. I automatically assumed that was in there for seniors and that it was a part of retiring. Now I've learned over the last few years that individuals aren't covered, and you should be covered. Also, she mentioned climate change. Because of our impact on the climate is now having an impact on us. And if we don't do something about it, it's going to be too late to turn the clock around. So she's absolutely correct. If globally everyone else is joining in or making sure climate change is something that we address, the United States should be a part of that as well, making sure that we address the issue also. But the two people that have been holding the infrastructure stimulus bill back, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, we have not heard a peep from them in regards to what they want. All we've been hearing about is the budget. What they want as far as, we don't want it to be this big, we want it to be this small, but they don't say what they want inside of the budget, and they don't tell why they want the budget to be smaller.
And I want to be very clear about this. If we vote for this underfunded, too small infrastructure bill alone, instead of voting for it with the rest of the president's agenda, if we vote for it alone, it could make our climate crisis worse, and it risks being the only or the last substantive piece of legislation that we will pass. I do not believe, we do not have the assurances necessary to believe in good faith that reconciliation will pass if infrastructure passes tomorrow, because it gives that small, narrow margin of Democrats that have, really been making this process quite difficult. There was an overall agreement between the process 2 months ago, and then there was a reneging of that. And so if we can just stick to our original plan, stick to the promises we've made each other, we can proceed in good faith and transform the lives of millions of Americans for the better.
Remember, at one point in time, as I mentioned the other day, Joe Manchin was on board with a $4 trillion infrastructure bill. Well, it's not $4 trillion. It is actually $3.5 trillion. Right around June, July, he was on board. Now he's down to $1.5 to $2 trillion that he's saying that this is what the infrastructure bill should be. He's just saying that he could care less about the American people, and all he cares about is the constituents that fill his pockets, which are the lobbyists. That's all he cares about. Hopefully, at the end of the day, the president is able to sit them down and get all this taken care of and get these bills passed, because people are in need for more stimulus and other programs that need to be available as soon as possible. Now, when it comes to being available and soon as possible, the cost of living increase will be announced. Now, what is the cost of living increase or adjustment? The COLA. What happens is when you're on SSI or SSDI, as many of you know, you receive what's called a cost of living adjustment increase based on the rate of inflation that year or the year prior. In other words, for example, they're saying that the cost of living adjustment may be for 2022 between 6% to 6.3%. Sounds great. However, inflation, because of what's taken place over the last couple of years, inflation has gone up to 5.3% to 5.4%. So your cost of living increase for January really isn't as much as they're trying to sell you to believe. Give you another example. The cost of living increase between 2000 and 2021 has only been 55%. Now that seems like a lot, that in the last 21 years or 20 plus years, you've received 55% increase. However, the rate of inflation since 2000 has actually been 58.89%. In other words, 59% inflation increase, yet you only received 55% of a cost of living adjustment. So anytime they try to let you think that you're getting something major, they still need to make some adjustments. How do they calculate it every year? Well, they take what's known as the Consumer Price Index for workers, in other words, the CPI/W, and they take July, August, and September numbers and calculate those together, and then say this is how much the cost of living increase is going to be for starting in January of 2022. So that's how they've been doing it every year. Is it fair how they calculate it? I don't think so. That's where there are a lot of bills that are out there right now trying to come up with a new format of how they calculate the cost of living increase so you don't be impacted by inflation as much as the fact of consumer spending by seniors. Now, let's talk about the date. Well, the date in which they decided to have the cost of living announcement or the cost of living adjustment announcement is on my birthday. Next Wednesday, October 13th, is the official day in which they're going to make the announcement of what the 2022 cost of living adjustment or COLA will be for those of you that are on SSI, SSDI. We'll be knowing what the number is next Wednesday, October 13th. So I will be definitely keeping you guys posted in regards to once they make the official announcement.